Good evening and welcome to a hybrid mode of panel discussion. And I think this mode is very relevant for the topic that we are going to discuss. A topic that is most discussed, or I would rather say most debated. The future of work and what does it mean for us. And I'm sure everybody sitting in this hall today and everybody outside the hall as well is contemplating on what the future of work should be. I think the panelist before our session mentioned, the future is not a replica of the past. I think that is what brings in a lot of gray in what the future of work is going to be. So the forces of change have fundamentally altered, like 3 dimensions of work. One is the work itself. Second, who does the work, which is your workforce. And third, where does the work happen, which is the workplace. And over the past 3 years now, the world of work has changed dramatically, or rather I would say irrevocably, and forcing organizations to actually relook at what employee experience is and what employee experience actually should be. And there are multiple converging trends that are having an impact on these 3 Ws, as we call, which also have further implications on individuals, businesses, and societies. So our conversation today will provide an overview of what these trends are, how are they impacting or driving the evolution of these 3 Ws, and how, as organizations, we can be better prepared for any unforeseen challenges that come our way. Ekene, I should say good morning and thank you for joining us virtually. So let me start off with the biggest W, as we call, which is the workforce. And the first question actually is to Ekene. Ekene, in your view, what would be the future workforce look like? I mean, we talk about millennials, we talk about robots, we talk about gig workers in many aspects. How do we integrate the human workforce with their digital colleagues? And how do you think the definition of careers is going to change in the future? Ekene, we can't hear you. No, not yet. Can the nasscom tech team help us? Would you mind saying something, Ekene? No, we can't hear you. So we'll probably come back to the important W workforce a little later, as second part of the conversation. Maybe we next move into the next W, which is where the work should be done, which is actually the workplace. Is it being co-located in a building? Is it remote working?
Hello?
Is there no definition of workplace? Ekene, glad to have you back. Can you just say something so that we can hear you?
Do you hear me?
We can. This just reinforces that the first W is the most important, which is the workforce. So welcome back, Ekene, back to your question.
Yeah, no, so look, thank you for the invite, and it's a shame that I couldn't quite make it to Bangalore today. It's a city that I like visiting, so maybe the next time I'm invited to nasscom, I'll be there in person. I'd sort of say that about 5.5 years ago, when I sort of joined Morgan Stanley, one of the trends that we saw at that point in time was that, generally speaking, our employees were getting younger, right? So whether they were millennials, baby boomers, etc., they were getting younger. On the flip side of that, we also saw that the leaders within our organization were getting much older, right? So what we actually sort of like saw at that point in time is that the preferences that our youth wanted, which is around flexibility, increased wellness and well-being, or health and wellness in the office, collaboration, and more tech like we have at home, was somewhat disconnected to what leadership wanted. So in many respects, I kind of like consider that to be an employee and an employer, a leadership disconnect, right? What the pandemic did for us was actually force leaders to see that in order to keep our workforce engaged, right, and wanting to sort of like show up and work for you, you had to do something to fundamentally close that gap and enrich the offerings that you have fundamentally for our employees. So what does it mean in the context of workforce of the future? If employees are getting younger, what does it ultimately mean? I think ultimately it means for me that some roles, right, you will see are best served, right, being in the office. Some roles, right, we will see are probably best served remotely, maybe less roles than there are roles that are tied in the office. But ultimately, for all roles, one of the things that we know that will be increasingly important is how can we actually connect those employees, whether they're in the office or working remotely, to the mothership to maintain the fundamental culture of the organization that we want to be part of. And a lot of this depends on the industry. Financial services, where I come from, and the culture of the firm that we also kind of have. A lot of what we then design for the workforce of the future will depend on those factors: the industry, the culture you want, and also leadership preference. At my firm, we value ideas. At my firm, we are big on an apprenticeship culture. So for us, that translates to a workforce which is more hybrid, where 3 to 4 days per week, people are expected to be in the office. 1 to 2 days a week, people are expected to work from wherever they choose to work, right? But are still connected very much to the Morgan Stanley mothership. And ultimately, some thoughts around kind of the sort of the current industrial revolution that we're in at the moment, which I sort of say this is the fourth revolution that we're in, i.e. the revolution of robotization, if there's such a word. That's probably what it is. I remember, when I was like young and I was kind of studying in the UK, we studied the industrial revolutions that happened over the years. The first one was in the 1700s, started in 1760, when the steam engines came out, when mechanical production started. The second one was in the early 20th century, which was around mass production. The third one was kind of something that some of us kind of, were born into, which was the industrial revolution that was kind of focused around kind of automation. Each time an industrial revolution occurred, there was this big fear, right, that the person, the human being, would fundamentally be wiped out, right, and would be rendered useless or unproductive in that environment. And what's been incredible is that humans have an incredible ability to adapt to new things that occur, right, and effectively find ways that they could be more valuable. The work that they do could be more valuable as the machine or technology or automation or robotization that comes into play. So I'm somebody that tends to be more optimistic. What I don't know is how robotization, AI, will impact humans and the work that we do. But what I do know is that human beings have an incredible ability to transform what they do, what they focus on, where they add value. That means that ultimately at some point in time, we'll find the perfect balance. So that's how I'll answer your question on that.
Thank you, Ekene. I mean, the human race has been through so many industrial revolutions. I think we've emerged much more resilient and much more stronger, right, after every industrial revolution. But these changes also, Shantanu, and my question will be to you, bring about a sense of panic, a sense of chaos, until such time, there's a structure that's been brought to it. There are guardrails that are put around it for the human race to actually go through that process of change. So what do you think are the boundary conditions to foster these changes? And how do you think the entire hiring strategies will evolve in the new world?
Sure. So first of all, thanks to NASSCOM for giving me the opportunity to be here. Coming back to the question, Mamatha, I think from a hiring strategy perspective, I think discussed in the previous panel as well. But we need to start looking at hiring people who are more T-shaped, which basically means apart from your core functional expertise, there's a view of being cross-functional or at least an inclination for that. The second I would say is, demonstrating leadership. You need leadership even at the lowest common denominator, somebody who takes ownership, somebody who kind of takes initiative. And finally, I guess, we've survived through these various industrial revolutions because we were not the strongest, but we were the most adaptive. And so it's important that when we hire today, we hire for that aptitude of being adaptive, because today what that employee may be doing may not be doing the same thing tomorrow, and that requires a certain amount of aptitude. So that's one aspect of how our hiring has to be. And of course, everything that allows these qualities to get inculcated into the workforce is what organizations will have to develop. How do they make people more T-shaped? How do they instill leadership at the lowest common denominator? And how do they make them more adaptive?
Thank you, Shantanu. And Ekene spoke about being flexible, you spoke about being adaptive, and this is the biggest W, like I said, the workforce that we are talking about. But the next one, which is probably equally important, is the workplace. Do workplaces need to get adaptive? Do workplaces need to get flexible to suit what the future of work is going to look like? So Mohua, the question to you is, fundamental question, is what is the office for in the new world? What it is meant to accomplish, and does it really matter when and where work gets done?
So office definition has evolved. Just like we adapted, the definition of office has also changed over time. When I started, office used to be one place where we all would come to productively deliver whatever we have learned in college, or maybe after that learned through experience. Now the office has to change because all parameters have now become very, very non-linear. And what I mean by that is, see, if you talk about all of us, we are a lot more global today than we used to be 20, 30 years back. We are all mobile. All the people sitting here, I can guarantee a lot of them are not Indian citizens. A lot of them are probably out of towners, so we are mobile. So skills, and okay, that's the first dimension. The second dimension, skills. There is no way a kid who's learned in college today will use exactly that learning a year from today. Technologies are becoming extinct in a year's time or less. So that is also evolving every minute. Having said that, what is the guarantee that the skills that we need will be in the same city to be hired by us? That's the reason the definition of office has changed. Second thing is what Ekene also talked about, is not all are human. Today we have human together with digital employees. Given all these changes, the definition of office has changed. What is the core need of an office? All of us want our employees to be able to deliver productively. All of us want employees' well-being. All of us want employees to be able to collaborate. And the fourth thing is the corporate culture. There should be a way for us to, all of us to internalize the corporate culture. As long as a space, whatever that be, meets these requirements or helps us meet this requirement, it should qualify as an office. And that is why we need the hybrid concept. That's why the hybrid concept has come up, that sometimes some of these two of these four requirements can very easily be delivered from home or from anywhere, whereas for collaboration, as well as for internalizing the corporate culture, we do need to come face to face. So offices are still there. Even though we have different definitions, we still have offices all around us.
It's a redefined 4 pillars of the workplace, and not necessarily the brick and mortar 4 pillars. Shantanu, coming back to you, and this is probably all of us are actually grappling with, right, in our day-to-day life today, and it's a very, very relevant question, is what are the key challenges of a hybrid workplace? And how can we as organizations focus on the human aspects to address these challenges related to a hybrid model?
I mean, I would like to say and then draw a parallel. If you cannot do nursery education remotely, there's very little that learning and collaboration can happen in any organization, and that's the biggest challenge. So when we get to a very hybrid workforce or a hybrid situation, the biggest challenge would always be how to drive collaboration, how to drive innovation, because they can't be done remotely. It requires a human connection that so far the technology has not been able to bridge. So that's, I feel, the biggest challenge would be. The second is, I think, about purpose. When we talk about, workplace, think about it as like three circles. Like one is a circle of, what's the purpose of the organization? What's the purpose of the employee or the workforce? And what's the purpose of the office? The size of the intersection of all the three circles will determine the purpose of or the relevance of the office. Now, let's take an example where we take the office circle out of the equation and try to see what is the intersection between the purpose of the organization's purpose of the employee. My belief is, and people can argue that I have a vested interest in having that view, is the fact that unless and until you have the office in the middle, the intersection of the employee purpose and the organization purpose is very difficult to achieve. So office in that way is the glue which creates alignment between the employee's purpose and the organization's purpose. And if somebody has figured that out as to how to do it, that's what the workplace would be. That's how the challenges we'll be able to kind of go over them.
I think then just to summarize, what is the office? What is the workplace? Workplace is the glue, right? That pulls everything together. So thank you, Shantanu, for that. So we've covered who, which is the workforce. We've covered where, which is the workplace. Let's talk about the what, right? Which is actually the work. And the augmentation and automation of a lot of tasks that are happening, we see and we spoke about how the skills are changing ever so rapidly, especially after the pandemic and increased digitization. Mohua, a question for you. Given this evolving space of physical and virtual, how do you think this will actually influence the nature of work that we undertake in organizations today? And do you think organizations will move more towards outcome-based rather than the current work-based perspective that we see?
Absolutely. I think the biggest challenge that this hybrid workforce or remote working has thrown is to the people managers. All of us, or many of us, were used to seeing the people right in front of us, or maybe in a different office, in a different country, but still people were in office, you could see them. You could see how many hours they are putting in. That is a thing of the past today. So it has to focus on outcome. So that is the biggest challenge I think this mode of working has brought in. But also thanks to the pandemic, which has proven that distributed working is very possible. And necessity is the mother of invention, right? So many tools and technologies have evolved or developed, like the simple collaboration tools. They were so extinct. I mean, if I think about it, 3-4 years back, and what we have now, it's a different quality altogether. So having said that, I think the managers need to definitely start focusing on, and they have started focusing on outcome because you cannot measure inputs anymore, which is something I have thought that this should have happened long back. Because what has taken place now is today for the managers, what is most important is trust, empathy, and open communication. And for the employees, it is, of course, open communication, and it is commitment and professionalism. This always was there. It's not that this was not the requirement before. It's just that it has been tried and tested to the hilt during this pandemic. And I think we have all evolved from that. And right now, all of us are a lot more comfortable running that way, a lot more comfortable talking about outcome-based than input-based.
Just a follow-up question to that, Mohua, and Shantanu, Ekene, happy for any of you to take this question. So, how can organizations optimize both flexibility and performance?
See, if you have trust and empathy at the core, I think it is very possible. See, we were just discussing right before the session that many of our roles, and we are a bank, so we are guided by a lot of restrictions and regulations and all of that. But what we have is, as long as the role doesn't, besides having 70% of our Indian workforce and 100% of Pakistan and Egypt workforce working remotely, what we also have is flexibility as long as the role doesn't need a person to put in a certain number of hours from here to here. It is all defined by the manager and the employees. We are very open for employees to work, say 4 hours in the morning, and then it's kids' time for a few hours, and then you connect back again. So I think what has changed primarily is the trust and empathy, because we have been forced to focus on that, and that has given way to this. So flexibility has taken over, and once you are flexible, I think it is possible.
It's a nice segue into the next question, because you're talking about trust. Ekene, if I can come back to you. As we reimagine work, do you see AI as a threat or as an opportunity? We can't hear you again. No.
Can't hear you.
We cannot hear you. Did the question have to do something with Yeah. We'll come back to you then, Ekene, maybe we could sort the technology. Okay, so we've covered, like I said, the three Ws. So it's an overarching question to actually, three of you. So it's more futuristic. If you were to have a crystal ball, then what would this be? So 5 years from now, when you're describing the incredible success, right, of your respective organizations, what would you be talking specifically about the working conditions, which is the workforce, the workplace, and the work itself? Is it going to be different from today? If it is, how different is it going to be?
I think, crystal ball gazing is like one of the most difficult things to do, and, also the most risky. But I would say that like 5 years from now, or even say 10 years from now, what we thought the future would be, the future will not be that, right? Whatever we're projecting sitting today, what the future would be, one thing is certain, that the future will not be that, right? So that's something, if we understand from the beginning, then we are much more settled with what is to come. Secondly, I think the only thing that will possibly remain constant is how do we create the alignment of purpose, and in anything that does that will create the success in the future. So whether it's with the work force, whether it's with the work itself, and whether it is with the workplace. So I think everything needs to go back to it's a primary question of the purpose. And if that we are able to define, then I think the path in forward for us will be much easier. Also coming back to the question of the AI, I think it's an opportunity, but it's an opportunity depending upon how we look at it. If we are adaptive, then it's an opportunity. But if we are not adaptive, if we look at it as a threat, it will wipe us out. So it depends upon how we look at it.
Mohua, any thoughts from you?
So I completely agree with Shantanu for once now. That yes, we cannot predict the future. But one thing that we have learned in the last few years is that as long as we are adaptive, as long as we are innovative, and we are ready to question the norm, break the norm, I think we are keeping our eyes and ears open, I think we would figure out what's the best for that moment. None of us thought that we can have a session, panel discussion, with Ekene sitting in New York and all of us sitting here. So that, 4 years back, nobody would have thought about it. So even though we don't know what's going to come, we'll figure it out.
Thank you, Mohua. Ekene, are you back again? No, we cannot hear you, but I think Shantanu did respond on your behalf very well on the AI question, I would think. So apologies, I think, for the technical glitch. But I think a very, very interesting conversation, a very relevant conversation on reimagining the power of 3 Ws. I think the few things that are coming out very clearly: trust, empathy, adaptability, flexibility, the workplace being the glue that can bind the work and the workforce together. This is something that we will continue to grapple with as the future unfolds, and the future unfolds at a rapid pace. But as long as we are adaptive and we respond and not react to these changes, we've seen, like Ekene mentioned, we've seen so many industrial revolutions. We will see through this as well and emerge much more stronger, more resilient, more productive. But I think the need of the hour is to develop a blueprint for a human-centric work design. I think that is really the kind of the outcome of the session. Thank you so very much, Mohua, Shantanu, Ekene, for your thoughts. I don't know how we are doing with time, because I can't see it. Well, it says time's up, so apologies. We cannot take any questions, but all of us are around if you have any specific comments, views, or questions. But thank you so very much for joining us, and Ekene, have a wonderful day.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to NASScom YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.